get a feeling that the ANC in Gauteng doesn't want to govern with the DA. Thank you very much.
Can I just say, it's not the way we want. It's the way the agreement says. Okay? It's the way the statement of intent says. It's not the way we want. I just want to clear up that point, Solly.
All right. So I think the first thing is to have an understanding of what we had put on the table in terms of the proportionality. And I must bring the public into confidence here and say the South African psyche is that push, get into something, and then 6 months down the line you get blamed for it. What would have happened if we now take this as is and we go into government, and anything that happens in cabinet that doesn't really reflect what we are trying to then achieve? 6 months down the line, the public starts having an outcry about lack of service delivery and all of that. We're going to be blamed to say you are part of this government. And you forget that we now got into this with very limited say in what happens in that particular cabinet. So that is where we're coming from. That's the first thing. What are we prepared to then do? We haven't closed the door. Helen is still engaging with the national leadership. Part of the national leadership was there today. They were in this meeting. The SG was in this meeting, but left halfway because as well we have reached broadly, the principles, and the spirit was that we would have continued with it until we reached consensus. But unfortunately, that has broken. When it got to the point where we then said, if you're looking at the statement of intent, it doesn't really talk to what is actually being put on the table, and the interpretation thereof. It's something that still remains a little bit of a concern. Now, what are we prepared to then do? We're prepared to then go and say, if we are willing to look at this and also be able to then find, the middle ground where, the numbers are changed slightly, because then we need to then ensure that, there's not an over-representation, of the ANC in this particular cabinet. We agree that, they can have, a majority number, but it doesn't mean that you have to have 2 for 1, as an example. You have to then find a balance there, and this is what we are proposing. If the ANC is willing to meet us on that, in that regard, we're willing to then, get around the table. But should that not happen, we will gladly take, the opposition seats. We will gladly, engage with them on an ongoing basis, on an issue-by-issue basis. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will be, jumping at the first opportunity to pass a motion of no confidence. I don't think the DA operates in that particular manner. We want to then ensure that there is a government that works. We hope to be part of the government that works. But if it means that we will have to do it from an opposition perspective, we'll be gladly do that.
So just maybe to add on that. So here in Gauteng, you have clearly said, and the DA has clearly said, that they do not want to work with the EFF. If the ANC takes you to, or agrees to the terms that we are speaking about, does it then mean in the municipalities that's what we are going to see? Because it would not make sense for the province or for the provincial leadership to work together while municipalities or regional areas are not working together. Would it be something that you're willing to discuss, to say maybe let's take them out and work together everywhere in Gauteng? And also, just last year, my understanding is that they offered you 2 seats, or you demanded 2 seats of education and health. And that was the agreement when you went to vote for the premium in the legislature. Is that the position?
No, I don't think when we went, and I don't know where that is coming from, when we went to engage with them initially, there was never even about portfolio allocation. It was about how do we deal with the issue of proportionality, because you have to agree on the numbers before you engage on the position. So we were not even at the position level as yet. So that's the first thing. The second part was that we were saying that let's deal with the province first. Let's deal with the issue of a national agreement. Once you have done that and the mechanisms are working, you can then say, remember, there is an intention to have call it the second CODESA, if you like, where civil society and everybody else will be engaged, as had been said, to then say how these things are going to work going forward. Part of the engagement could be how do we make local government work a whole lot better than going forward. But at this point in time, we're not where we are discussing the issues of local government. It has been how do we get the province going? How do we get a national government going? I think there's an issue of national government that has now been resolved. KZN has easily been resolved. Here in Gauteng, this is where we find ourselves.
But I think from later experience winter, it seems like it was a very frustrating day. What are some of the reasons that the ANC is giving as to why they aren't moving or they aren't willing to give up some of these positions?
Okay. Well, I'll surmise, I don't know for sure. Yesterday, the Premier, Panyaza Lesufi, was going to call a press conference to announce his cabinet. And he was probably going to say, this is what it is, and I'm leaving these 3 seats for the DA. Then Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General, intervened and said no. And I happened to be in Gauteng for another reason, and I stayed over, and I came here today. And Fikile Mbalula was there, and we did have this discussion. And then it emerged that the ANC was going to announce 7 ANC people and 8 ANC people. That's Panyaza plus the 7. 8 and leave 3 for us, which was what we suspected, but it was confirmed today. Now, why is the ANC sticking on 8? Apart from the fact that I don't think they fully realize that the voters want power sharing. They don't want us to be co-opted. They want us to share power. They don't want us to become hostages of the ANC. They want us to be genuinely in power, not just in office. The second thing is that the ANC is very, very divided in Gauteng. And they need to put together an executive that takes account of all the various factions and put them together. That is my surmise. And that is why they need to have enough places to satisfy enough people. We're having a similar challenge currently in Parliament, and I'm not here to talk about Parliament, but we also need a fair allocation of various House chairs and other things in terms of the statement of intent. We cannot be rolled back on everything as if we are some kind of useful crutch to keep the ANC in power. We're a party in our own right with a mandate from the voters that intends to execute that mandate in a power-sharing arrangement. And that is our commitment to the residents of Gauteng, who voted for us in very large numbers, and we will fulfill that commitment, and we won't allow the wool to be pulled over our eyes.
Heidi, and then I'm going to the serve the back.
It's Heidi Jacobs from ANC again. I just want to ask in terms of what point does the DA walk away? Is there a condition? I mean, I asked this question to the PA on Sunday, and they said if we don't get a post provincially or nationally, we're out. Is the DA thinking about that here in Gauteng? If you don't get what you ask for, will you eventually walk away? Because, I mean, the talks with the ANC, they are sticking to what they are offering and what's on the table. And sorry, I asked you this morning, and you said you don't want to get into it, but I'm going to ask you again. What did you ask for? You said you don't want to speak about portfolios, but are you able to tell us which portfolios you actually asked for?
Okay.
Sol, you go first.
All right. So I think Helen will talk about the walking away part. Let me respond to what we were proposing, because in the negotiations you don't stamp your authority. You propose, there's a counter proposal, and you take it from there. What we said is that we're looking at the Department of Infrastructure Development, DID. Ideally, we would have loved to incorporate that with COCTA for a number of reasons. You're looking at municipalities that are falling apart. You're looking at infrastructure that is falling apart. Therefore, you want to then start coordinating the working of the infrastructure from a provincial perspective, but working with municipalities. That's why you would want that. And this is what we thought that would be able to then bring in some impact in that regard. We said we would look at education or health, not both, that one or that one. And we said then the other one which we would look at was economic development, or no, transport. We were looking at transport, and then we were also now looking at economic development, which would have also included agriculture as well. as alternatives to that. So we didn't come and say, you give us this position or we walk away. We said these are the proposals that we would want to then put on the table.
What did the ANC offer you? Did they tell you which positions?
We were not there yet.
So they didn't say transport?
We were just told, give us 3 names and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, and you see, that's the problem, if I may say. Heidi, you've used terms like, what did you want and what did they offer? And that displays the imbalance in those discussions. Because we're working in terms of this agreement. And this states very carefully and clearly what is our right. It's not that we come as supplicants with a begging bowl. We are trying to implement an agreement signed by ourselves and by the ANC. And we take it seriously. We genuinely do. Because you can't establish governments in good faith unless these agreements are taken seriously. It's like having an anti-nuptial contract and everybody just ignores it afterwards. You can't do that. I've been in many governments before. I've taken over many governments from the ANC, actually. And I now run the DA's governance unit, which manages a lot of coalitions across the country. And if these documents aren't worth the paper they are written on, then the government that emerges from it is on rocky ground and has no foundation. So we expect the agreement to be implemented, which I think is absolutely rational and fair. And not only is it rational and fair, it is a prerequisite for the government to work. So we are saying clause 16, proportionality, reflects the outcome of the election, and inclusivity is important for us. It's not a question of how much will the ANC give us and what are we demanding. We do it on the basis of a document. And we expect them to be fair with us and help us build trust. Not say, oh, we'll decide on the other parties and we'll negotiate with the other parties. Meanwhile, today they admitted they wanted all of the 7+1 for themselves. That's not conducive to building trust, because we would have ended up with 3 in a cabinet of 11, and they would have had the rest of the 8, having fobbed us off, saying all the time, we're bringing in the smaller parties, but never taking us into their confidence as to which ones they were. So we're saying we're at the table. If you're not prepared to live by these documents, we will go into opposition. And we don't mind being in opposition. It is our comfort zone. And it's not a threat. It's just a fact. And facts aren't threats. No threats here, just a fact that we will go into opposition if the agreements that we signed are not honoured, which is a totally rational position to take. And we know that the next election is 2 years away from now, which is round the corner, and we'll see what happens there.
I just want to make one thing clear. We did not walk away. There were an offer from the ANC. We made a counter offer. They were unwilling to accept our counter offer, and that ended the negotiations there. So I'm coming to you, and then I'm coming to the gent over here.
Thank you. Shannon Merricks from Kasi Broadcasting Africa. We put the same question to the ANC about the document. As you call it a prenup, we call it a love letter. It's like a Labola negotiation. You agree, those are the terms, those are the clauses, those are the paragraphs, and we didn't get any answers last night on the same point. Now that you're sitting where you are sitting, in your love letter, you say Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, national is one package. What do you do if Gauteng collapses? Because it's about to collapse. It's 9/11. It's going to collapse.
Okay. Let me say that we agreed that we wouldn't conclude the Gauteng negotiations until we'd concluded the national negotiations, but they stand separately. So we aren't, and I'll be quite honest, I mean, we could threaten to bring KwaZulu-Natal down if they don't agree to the document's terms in Gauteng, but we're not going to do that. We're not irresponsible people. We don't want to hand KwaZulu-Natal to MK and the EFF. It would be a total disaster for that province. So we're not about to do that. There are other levers that we're going to use. Obviously there are. But we're not going to say the people of KwaZulu-Natal can be thrown to the dogs. Not at all. And we are also going to say that unless we have a respectful settlement in Gauteng, we're not going to sit and do negotiations around the reconstitution of all the metros like Ekurhuleni and like Johannesburg and like Mogale City. Because we have to build a basis of trust with the ANC. And they must tell us the truth, because we have to be partners in a government of provincial unity. It is not a situation in which they tell us what to do and we meekly accept it.
Sir?
I'm speaking from the ANC. I would like to know, because you've managed to reach an agreement with the other provinces. So in Gauteng, is the ANC and the DA only disagree about the proportionality or that's not?
I think the disagreement here is where you started, because that's the base. So you're not at the space where you're talking portfolios and positions. It's at what is proportional representation. So I think that's where we got stuck. In KZN, by the way, the ANC proposed that they use proportionality. The IFP was a little bit uncomfortable with it. We persuaded the IFP to go with it. And this is why it was then dealt with so speedily that they're able to then find each other and they're able to then form government. The same principle was actually even reached at the national level. This is why you ended up having this. So for us, then it becomes a stumbling block, if you like. If what has been done in KZN and proposed by the ANC, what is done at a national level proposed by the ANC, becomes stuck when it comes to Gauteng. And this is why we're not able to then get to the next step, because we're still stuck on the first step, and that is how do we then deal with the issue of proportionality. Perhaps in KZN it was the easiest thing because they felt they didn't have the big number, so they needed to push as much as they possibly can to get to the satisfactory MEC number that they would want to then get to. Be that as it may, it's okay. But it was the principle that we agreed to. At a national level, it was the principle that we agreed to. Here, it becomes a problem where we are told proportionality, doesn't mean much. But how do I go and say to the voters that have given us 28% that you have to settle for 2 positions in the cabinet, while the second biggest party is only bringing in 34%, while there's only a 6% difference between us. But if you're looking at the allocation of seats, then there's a vast difference in that. Then we will be sitting in a corner where all that we'll be doing is to rubber stamp what the ANC is actually then saying to us. And unfortunately, as a Democratic Alliance, we're really not prepared to do that. We made a promise to the people of Gauteng that we will bring some kind of difference and to rescue and to make sure that government works for them. And therefore, if we are going to do that, and the mandate from the residents is that go form part of government and have a voice in that, therefore we need to then find each other in that. And this is what we've explained to the ANC. And we said respectfully, are we able to then find each other? Respectfully, are we able to then take the spirit of what the voters have said? So if you take the spirit of what the voters have said, you can't say I'm taking 80% of the power, I'm giving you 20%. And then we will not even have mechanism in terms of, when there's disputes, how do we then deal with those disputes? Because then all I'm coming to do is to then rubber stamp your decision. Then, for me, then it would have been a waste of the 28% that we got from the people of Gauteng.
And remember, the 28% is 45% of the combined DA and ANC total. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Okay. I'll go 2 more questions. Sir, we go first.
Good afternoon. Alpha Mushani here from Eyewitness TV. In the legislature, President Check of the DS was appointed or elected deputy speaker on the day that the premier was elected as well. And of course, if you walk away from this, do you make of some of the comments that made about the PA style of negotiating? I mean, it was basically characterized as an arrogant party or a party with unfulfilled demands. What do you make of those comments? Thank you.
All right. We are going to have a caucus conversation in terms of what happens with the position that is currently there. And then obviously we'll release a statement on that once we've had a caucus engagement. You would appreciate we're coming straight from that particular meeting into this particular one. We haven't had an opportunity to then go into details of what are the ramifications for the decisions if it's going to go the way that it's going to go. So we're not at the end as yet. So you can't make a decision as if you are at the end. Until and at such time as the ANC says we are at the end, then we'll take it that we're at the end, then we'll make a decision on that. Going back on the issue of yes, being characterized. Look, if there's one thing that we'll never do is to stoop to low levels of name calling. I don't think that is good. I think that is very much embarrassing. We're not going to do that. But I'll give you the facts. You are called into a meeting to then say, come, let's engage and negotiate. You go into a meeting, you put your proposal in writing. You are given a proposal on the fly. Somebody sitting there and says, I think I can give you one. And in that meeting we say, please don't talk about giving us something, because we're not coming here as if, we're sitting with a begging bowl, as Helen has said. We're coming here to engage in all honesty and in a professional manner, that we're putting everything that we're saying on the paper and we're saying, let's discuss this. You continue to then say, well, I'll up my offer by 2, just like that. And then when we then put something to you back in writing, you then say, okay, let me go and engage my executive committee and then I'll come and talk to you. We agreed that, okay, this is what is going to happen. A proposal that has been put on the table is going to be discussed. And there will be a follow-up meeting by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That is yesterday, by the way. By yesterday, 4 o'clock, nothing came to. We never got a call. We never got a love letter, as the gentleman is calling them. And by 5:30, do we get a media statement that's saying there's going to be an announcement at 7 o'clock? Now you tell me, A, who's negotiating in bad faith, but B, who's behaving like a bully. Because a bully says, well, come kicking or screaming or, go to hell. That's somebody who's negotiating in bad faith. We don't do that. We came, we put everything that we needed to put in writing on the table, and as part of the negotiations, you then say, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that, and then you then engage and behave accordingly. But we're not going to stoop to levels of name calling. We're not going to stoop to levels of characterizing people as spoiled brats and all of that. We are serious about running government, and I think it will also reflect in how we behave ourselves here and how we engage in the conversations as well. If somebody wants to then behave in a manner that represent what happens somewhere else, not in a serious setup, then it is for them to then answer, not for us.
May I just add to that? Arrogant has become the ANC's favorite word. If you don't agree with them, you are by definition arrogant, because no one's allowed to disagree. When we request and require that signed agreements be respected and implemented, then suddenly we're arrogant. Asking people to respect documents that have been signed and agreed to through a process is not arrogant. It's the way the world functions in a predictable and orderly way. And all we are asking for is agreements to be respected and to be treated as partners and not as supplicants. We understand that the ANC is slightly bigger than we are in Gauteng. It's the third biggest party in KwaZulu-Natal, but it is the biggest party still in Gauteng. And we respect that, and we will recognize that in implementing the agreement. But equally, we expect to be recognized as the second biggest party, not far behind. And we need a respectful interchange. We don't go to the media and say things about the ANC as, for example, they said about us last night. We come in a respectful tone, referring to the documentation that's been signed, referring to the expectations that are legitimate of our voters, and looking forward to ensure that when we're in government, we are not just in office, but that we have some power in proportion to the votes we bring to the government of provincial unity. That is not arrogant. That is decent and respectful and in fact expected by the negotiated settlement.
Last one.
Sorry.
No, that gentleman is going to have the last one.
Basically, I think the question about do you feel as the DA that negotiating with the provincial leadership of the African National Congress is not getting you anywhere, and you would like the leadership of the party to intervene and to negotiate with them rather than the provincial leadership? And the other one was, do you have the feeling that the Premier does not want to work with the DA? Thank you very much.
Well, I'll gladly answer that. You just need to go back to the elections, the ANC's own elections 2 years ago, and realize that the people that is the chairperson and somebody who was contesting them are actually still in a power tussle as things are. And therefore now you have people that are still trying to then ensure that they are able to then feed their own, call it their own factions, if you like. But also there's another element. If you read at the ANC's own, and I don't want to be speaking on behalf of the ANC here, but they find themselves between a rock and a hard place. In that, if you have a premier that is a man, then you need to have more representation of women in the cabinet. And if they don't have enough position to satisfy that, remember in Gauteng they have 5 regions that they need to satisfy. They have additional SACP that they have to accommodate. They have COSATU somehow that they have to then accommodate in that. So not only do they have to deal with the 5 regions, they have to deal with the factions, they have to deal with the SACP, they have to deal with COSATU. So they must then answer that, to then say how much of this is a factor in terms of the decision and that they're taking and how they're not willing to then move. I mean, if the DA was willing to move up to 3, when you're looking at proportionality, what is given on the other side? That's the question that should be asked, but we're not getting there yet. I think that was, whether, we do believe that there is a bit of political or internal political game or internal political ambitions that are being answered to, yes. So this is what is actually then happening, or well, according to my own understanding and of what is the lay of the land there. And whether that means that, getting somebody like Fikile or the national guys to then come in and then deal with the situation. They went and dealt with the Northwest. Because Northwest, with its own, and as much as they were on their own, forming government, they couldn't agree on how, the portfolios are to be allocated and who's going to be in the cabinet and all of that. The Thuli House had to intervene because of the factions that were taking place there. So I think if there was and I'm not saying the ANC at a provincial, at a national level are not talking to each other. That is not for me to then, respond to. But I'm saying to you that if you were to then have people that are removed from what is happening here, you possibly could have a different, answer to what is actually brought us here today.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I think my question is directed to Helen. I want to play devil's advocate. As the DA, you run Western Cape, economic hub. In KZN, an economic hub, you got some few nice seats there. In Gauteng, 3 seats will put DA into the top 3 economic hubs in South Africa. So 2030, as the FedEx, you'll be happy, you'll smile. So that's the one side of the coin. The other side is for the ANC now. They've lost their 39%. So if they can keep Gauteng by hook or crook, I'm playing devil's advocate, they maintain one economic hub, which is basically Gauteng. So don't you think for them, even on the metros, because they already have agreement with other parties. For them, this is not about Lesotho. This is about the ANC as an entirety. To blame one person in a structure is neither here nor there. But don't you think they have much to lose to give you those 3 seats, MECs, irrespective whether it's sanitation, whether it's whatever, but then you're in charge of 3 economic hubs in the country.
Okay, thank you for that. Lesotho isn't a problem. You know, we're not blaming anybody. We're not blaming anybody. And let me just clarify one thing. This is not about carving up South Africa and saying one for you and one for you. This is about saying, what did the election result tell us? This is about the choice of the voters. If the voters don't vote for the ANC, we can't say, oh, well, we feel sorry for you, let's give you 1 economic hub. Because democracy works in that the voters choose. And if the voters don't give you 50% plus 1, the voters are telling you that you've got to make a plan with other parties. And especially when 2 parties are almost exactly the same size, as they are very closely in Gauteng, then it's not for us to say, well, it's fair to give the ANC 1 economic hub. No, the only thing that is fair in a democracy is to reflect the will of the voters. We've got an overall majority in Gauteng, in Western Cape, because the voters said that. The majority happen to like the way the DA governs there, and we get an overall majority there. In KwaZulu-Natal, we're the 3rd biggest party, and we respect that. And as Solly said earlier, the IFP wanted to take more seats, and we said, no, you can't. You've got to give the ANC their fair share, and we've got to give the least. We've got 2. That's fair because of our proportion in the electorate. But we can't merely get 3 or even 2 or even 1 here when we've got more than double in Gauteng what we've got in KwaZulu-Natal. So the question is not what's fair or unfair in a general theoretical sense of like handing out sweets to a group of children, if I can say that. What is fair is how do we reflect the will of the voters? That's what's fair.
Also, you need to have the ability to make a difference in government. So you don't want to be a marginalized partner then you're not a partner, then you're just basically co-opted. So you want to be a partner that can make a contribution. And I think, if we can make a contribution in all these economic hubs, we can prove ourselves as an alternative to the voters. And I think that's one of the important things that we want to achieve. But there needs to be mutual respect in order to get to that partnership. All right. Apologies that we started slightly late. Thank you very much for your patience, and thank you very much for your attendance. We really appreciate it. You're obviously welcome to engage with any of the leaders here one-on-one if you should wish to do so. Thank you very much, and that concludes the formal part of this conference. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everybody.
Notice.